First time in 3 weeks, I think, right? Greg, Aaron, Chuck. Jesse will excuse his presence today. Yeah, we had July 4th last week. Obviously, we're not doing this on July 4th. And the previous week was the ALA conference or something like that.
I think we were in between.
There was something going on. I don't know, but it's good to be back. And I wish I could stay here and tell you that we had news about anything. I mean,
we had one filing on the 601.
Yeah, so let's talk about the 601 delay litigation. And I really wish Jesse was here because he's kind of the expert on this as well here with us. But basically, over a month ago, the judge that we were assigned, who we thought was a great selection for us, transferred the case to another judge in the district, who apparently had at the time 2 single-filed 601A cases with him. And that lawyer didn't want to join our lawsuit. So the judge asked what do you want to, would you guys want to be together? And he said, no, we don't care. They didn't want to do it. And it's got to be 3 weeks now. We filed a notice with the court. Hey, look, here's where we stand on this. And we had already fully briefed before that the government's motion to dismiss. Now, since that time, the government has filed 2 or 3 notices to the court of other district courts, including one in his district, who said that they didn't have the legal authority under a recent Supreme Court case, it's a bad interpretation, by the way, to hear this case, which makes no sense whatsoever. Now, the thing is, we weren't part of those cases. We didn't write the pleadings. We don't know what the pleadings said in those cases. We know what the arguments were in those cases. But the government submitted those to the court. In the meantime, we submitted to the court evidence that the government's lying about taking cases in order, and thanks to all of you, and that they had increased their processing times by 20% from when they initially started the case. And as I noted, 900% since Biden became president. 900%. And then we have nothing. Now, I will also note, Aaron confirmed that we dismissed one plaintiff recently who got their...
We have had a little news.
So, Greg, what's the news you have?
Well, we've had some cases approved.
Right.
And we had 5 cases approved about over the last week or so, which is good. What we have also learned from Government's Counsel is a little bit about procedurally what's happening before these cases. I mean, it's been a bit of a mystery trying to decipher a lot of what's going on just from the data scraping that we can see. But a couple things are going on. One is that the government has set up this new virtual service center called the HART Service Center, which is Humanitarian something Service Center.
And it's not Humanitarian Asylum Refugee and or something like that.
It's not actually like in its own building and everybody is, like Lincoln or the Vermont Service Center, which is underwater right now, or any of the others. That's going to be, by the way, the new COVID. I'm sure that's going to be the reason why everything out of Vermont is taking a while. But what we know, the service center is basically going to be taking on humanitarian parole and the refugees and asylee cases, and et cetera, that are being handled at the service center level. What we understand is happening is that all of the people that they're just taking employees from other service centers or hiring completely remotely. So it's sort of a virtual separation from the other service centers, with, in theory, having its own management, et cetera. And we have been seeing the cases have been being transferred to that virtual service center. But what we think is happening is that they're not really shipping files anywhere. They are just changing it in the computer system, how the labeling is happening and who's responsible for it, and in some cases changing case numbers. What we've seen in these cases that have been approved in the last couple of days, and I'm just looking, is that right before the cases are getting approved, they are showing that they were transferred. So, like, for example, one that was approved yesterday, was transferred in the computer. It was transferred. It's actually 1, 2, 3, 4 transfers. It's showing up happening in the computer, but the last one was showing up on July 6th, and the case was approved on July 10th. So we have, for example, we know that there were 4 cases yesterday that are listed as now as being transferred. So what I'm trying to see is, are we going to see a couple more cases approved? Are those cases, we're going to start to see these specific cases showing a transfer approved? We know from other cases that we've done in the past with scraping that was always sort of the last thing we saw was as soon as the case was transferred, boom, we saw an approval after that. We also know from the government that there's a digitization process that's happening where these files are being scanned in, I guess. And as soon as that's being done, then I think once the scanning happens, I don't know what that's happening, then the case is being transferred to the hard service center. So it may be that the scanning is happening in the current service center where the case is, and then it's being transferred after that. But that's procedurally what's happening. So if you're going and you're looking and seeing what's happening on your case, and all of a sudden you're seeing that the case was transferred, that could be a good sign as far as things going. And so, 5 cases being approved over the last week is not a lot, but we also went basically probably with 5 or 6 weeks with nothing moving on any of these cases, not even the transfers or anything showing up in data scraping. So all of a sudden we're seeing a bunch of activity and a handful of approvals. So we'll see how things go.
Well, Greg, might this explain the repeated transfers back and forth, within days of each other? They're scanning these somewhere.
Right.
One thing they've never told us, where are they scanning these things?
Right. That could be that. So it could be that they are shipping them all off someplace for scanning, and that's being logged into the system. And then when it's being shipped back to wherever it's going to be actually adjudicated by, well, I don't know. Actually, I don't think that they're getting rid of the files anymore. I think we figured that out, that they had some problems because they got rid of the paper files.
Yeah, they destroyed some physical files.
Right.
They told
us that, and that was causing some problems. So anyway, I think, it sounds like they're still getting their process in order, but if it could be good news if this sort of the reason why they haven't been telling us anything for a long time is because this was all happening behind the scenes. That's an optimistic way to view it. It could be that they're just a mess and nothing was actually happening. But hopefully we're seeing a trend here, and we'll have more news, presumably next week.
Okay, so that's where we are. Well, I'm sure there'll be some questions we'll get to in a bit, and we'll go over those for folks. Aaron, I'm going to put up here the 601 litigation. Give us an update on that.
Sure. That's the case where we have a motion to dismiss that was filed by the government attorneys. They filed that at the 11th hour before their deadline, and we have 21 days to respond. We are working on that, and the response is due the 21st. So we will have that timely submitted. After that, the government's going to have the chance to submit a reply brief, and then the motion to dismiss will be ripe for a decision by the court. A lot of times in these cases, if you can survive the motion to dismiss, that's when they can feel a little bit more pressure to either move the cases and get them adjudicated or not. And so we're hopeful that we can get over this hump, and then that puts them in the position of really having to find out what's going on for each of our plaintiffs. Where are the cases? What is going on? And those communications can sometimes result in them just adjudicating the cases. So, but first we have to get over the hump of this motion to dismiss, and so we're working on that.
Perfect. So that's where we are. It's not a bad as motion to dismiss. It's a better written motion to dismiss than the one we saw in the 601A case, because they obviously learned their lesson a little bit. But I think we've got a great response to it. And, the reality is the government's taking the position, we can take your money, we can take as long as we want, including forever, and you can't do anything about it. That's why we sue. That is morally indefensible. It's especially morally indefensible coming from the Biden administration. This is what really angers me. Biden is supposed to be going to help all immigrants, and he's not. This is Trump action, is what this is. This is Trump action.
Although we'll get to some good news on the Biden administration a little bit later.
We'll get to those guys. I want to do update on the EB5 IR case. We will be changing the name again, by the way, because the IRs have been approved for their green cards. But this Friday is the deadline to produce the information on EB5s. Now, I will tell you, there was the one update on this case is the court required us to enter into a non-disclosure agreement. This is court rules on this related to this case and other cases that are similarly situated to this court. We agreed to that without any fanfare. The court filed with the court. So we will not be releasing this data publicly, but it is obviously a key to our motion for summary judgment, which I will be writing and will be done by the end of the month. I think it's due the 31st, with this data. So the data is going to be made public because it's going to be in the freaking motion for summary judgment. We're just not going to release it publicly to the wind. Although obviously if you're interested in this data, you should be FOIAing it because it will be publicly available. I mean, if you FOIA it. But this is, we're not going to be getting personalized data by individuals, but we will be getting data by country and by date of adjudication. So I think this is going to blow the doors off of it. I think once the court sees that, in fact, they're not following any rule of reason whatsoever at all and letting visas expire, basically not using all the EB-5s, I think the court's going to rule in our favor. I think this is a good thing. Aaron, I don't know if you had a chance to read any comments on or Greg on the protective order from the court.
Not yet.
Nah. Okay, that was easy. All right, we do have there's some litigation going on. Just an update on the United for Ukraine. That litigation is pending in federal court. The government response is due, I think, another 30 days or so. And I'm animatedly looking forward to the government's explanation about why they will not return $80 million to refugees.
One thing that's interesting about, I think, what we're going to see is that in the Shumalina case, which was the predecessor case, which we successfully filed last year yes, I guess in Chicago. In that case, the government was really, really careful not to actually ever give any kind of substantive response to anything going on in that case, other than to tell the judge that there was a settlement negotiation happening, sort of a phantom settlement negotiation happening. I guess it was all negotiating amongst themselves at USCIS because we never actually had a conversation about what the final thing would look like until it was out. But they were really careful not to take on Ukrainians and appear to be opposing. And this is the first opportunity in this case, I guess, that they're going to have to fight back if they choose to do so. So it'll be interesting to see whether they take a similar strategy or not. In this case, I don't know if you have any feelings about it, Chuck, or what kind of.
Yeah, I don't have any idea how they're going to defend against this. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing to argue if they're saying. I mean, if they never actually said they weren't following the law in the previous case, they just basically settled by giving us what we asked for, right? Which without it, although there was some statement that they said publicly where they said it had to do with the statute. It wasn't anything in response to the court.
No,
so it'll be interesting, but they have a sort of a twist. I mean, the logic is tough here because if they say that they're not in, I mean, were they doing this whole policy out of the goodness of their heart, or were they following a statute? And they never, that's the part I think that they're going to do. They say they're following the statute. The statute did not have any kind of delayed effective date. So I think they're in a bit of a bind if they say this has anything to do with the Appropriations Act for last year. They have to say it's completely discretionary, having nothing to do with Congress, in order for them to not have to give refunds on there. And that's a tough thing, I think, for them to argue. Well, especially since why are they doing it for Ukrainians and not for all these other parole classes that are out there, except for the fact that Congress required it.
Exactly. The only difference is the words of the statute.
Right. And if they're following the statute as opposed to just doing this as a discretionary policy, they don't really have any room to say that the statute didn't go into effect until November.
Yeah. So there you go. There is that. I do want to update you on my lawsuit against the USCIS for H-1B cap numbers. So last week I got right after the AILA conversation, this was last week. I did in fact get. No, let me take a step back. What I requested was the fiscal year 2022 cap numbers and approval. I mean, filings. How many were filed? How many were approved? How many denied? How many not adjudicated? And so last week I got a response for fiscal year 2023 numbers. And so I called the government lawyer and I said, my FOIA was for 2022. He says, yeah, we got you those numbers. I said, did you open the Excel spreadsheet? It's marked fiscal year 2023? Because those are, yes, it's in 2022, but it's fiscal year 2023. Oh, can we get 30 days to get that data together? So one thing I can tell you.
How does a government employee not understand fiscal years?
I understand that. One, two, how is this not a button on the computer? How they track cases? They have a cap, right? So they have to. Why is there not like a doomsday clock? 84,632, 33. Get yours in. They're going to hit 85. Apparently, they're not. So I will have that, and then we're going to put it together and kind of release it. I will tell you one secret thing from this, though. The approval rates for filed H-1Bs is about 98%.
Interesting.
FYI. Yeah, especially in light of where it was 3 years ago. So yeah, about 98%.
Although I'm interested also in what's happening with NOIDs and and also revocations. I don't know if you've asked for that, Chuck, because that's.
Yeah, I didn't FOIA that because that's
we
kind
are
of thing, right?
seeing reports of that happening based on the this USCIS quote unquote crackdown.
And I know our good friend John Wasden is been kind of leading the charge on that. Mm-hmm. It's been really interesting to see. It's not widespread. And I'm certainly I have no clients that are part of this, but how do you go after the foreign national?
Right.
How do you put a fraud bar on a foreign national who signed nothing?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. I don't get that. How are you not going? Well, the thing is, I don't know how you can go after the employers. You let it happen. I mean, you're putting an annotation on an online submission form. I don't think that's a regulation. I don't think you went through the APA process. I don't see it.
Just so folks know the history here on this, in 2011, I guess, when the proposed rule was coming out for this electronic registration system, that was a question that was raised in the comments, which was, they said, what about, people that are going to game the system, but just by having lots of employers file for them, or multiple employers basically getting together and filing separately for the same people on there. And they said that is not illegal. If Congress wants to deal with that, they can deal with that, but it's only illegal for one employer to file multiple applications for the same person and for the same occupation, I guess. And that's what they basically, it was an invitation for fraud.
That's their interpretation of the statute.
Right. So they now are sort of taking the opposite position, which is, we suspect you because you're doing this, even though in the past they said it was perfectly legal to do it. So they've created this bind for themselves. That's what our lawsuit was about.
And I think John Wasden is actually bringing some litigation on this issue. Good for him. Good for him. I don't see it as I don't see it as widespread as it needs to be.
Right.
Do you recall, by the way, how many notices went out for that? Hey, you've been selected as a winner. Do you recall fiscal year 2023? fiscal year winter numbers. I think it was 127,000.
It was somewhat more than last year, but not that much more.
Maybe 135,000, something like that. Well, we're going to be releasing how many actually filed as well. So
as a reminder, the solution that we've been talking about is a changing of the algorithm without necessarily having to go back and change the whole system, so that nobody gets more than one shot. Just take the gaming out of it. If they want to have multiple employers apply, change the algorithm so that the beneficiary only gets counted once for the lottery purposes. Very easy fix that they don't seem to be, and I know that that's been brought up to them by various commenters, but we'll see what they decide to do. But they're running out of time.
TikTok, baby. TikTok. Until, next year's lottery is just 8 months away.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is the whole H-1B fraud, USCIS action stuff. So I wanted to make sure we touched on that. Now, Greg, there has been a recent some policy changes I know you want to talk about with LItigation.
Yeah, I think it's it's pretty exciting, I think, for a lot of people. But it's we started to see with the Ukrainian program a new use of parole for basically solving big problems with using the parole authority, which allows the president to admit people and provide work authorization for humanitarian or public policy reasons. And it's traditionally been very much an individualized program. So, we've been using humanitarian parole for years and years, and it's usually the government, unfortunately, has been pretty conservative about approving those. But this is, it started with the Ukrainian program with the 100,000 plus from Ukraine that were admitted. Side note on this, one of the big success stories of these parole programs is the e-filing component to it. And I think it's the best example yet we've seen at USCIS of a successful electronic system that's been rolled out. So kudos to them for the good job that they've done on that. Those cases have been approved remarkably quickly compared to other programs. But the Ukraine program was first, and then something called the CHNV program, which was for Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. Different type of program where basically the idea is we want to give you an incentive to apply to come to the United States from your home country rather than showing up at the southwest border of the U.S. So the Biden administration created a program, I think that is $25,000 a month was the target, although these programs seem to be a little loose as far as how, whether
if they're counting as well as they count H-1Bs, I'm pretty sure it's more.
I think it's a target. It's not sort of a hard limit on there, but that's the number that they're hoping, that they're basically allocating. So that program has been going for a couple of months, and I think it's been well received. And so consequently, they announced in April that they were going to actually be doing something for this new group of countries, which is the GESH countries. I'm trying to figure out a sort of an acronym, but it's Guatemala, El Salvador, Guatemala, El Salvador,
Honduras,
Colombia, and Honduras.
Colombia.
GESH is Salvador. Salvador is yes on there. But anyway.
What about chess? You just go with chess.
All right.
Colombia, Honduras, El Salvador.
But anyway, this program is different.
It's Chegg.
This program is different, and I'm really hoping that this becomes sort of a model for much broader use of this. But basically, this is for people that are waiting on I-130s. They have approved I-130s for family petitions by permanent resident and citizen family members in the U.S. That are in the preference categories. If they were an immediate relative category, they don't really need that program. But for those folks, if they have an I-130 approved, so if you have a brother or sister in the U.S. who's a U.S. citizen that's applied, or a parent applied for an adult child, or who's a permanent resident, or basically any of the family categories, you can now apply for parole to come to the United States and wait in the United States for your number to become current and eventually file for adjustment of status. It's a huge benefit, and it's really going to change lives for the better. It solves a lot of problems in the immigration system. when we have this sort of orderly way for people to be here and wait and work legally. It's good for the U.S. economy too, which needs these workers really badly. But that program is rolling out. Key on it is that you can't apply for it until the State Department has actually notified you that you are eligible to apply. I've already been getting, I'm sure you guys have been getting.
And what is the criteria to be notified that you're eligible?
I have the notice up in the Federal Register, so let's look at it. The invitation goes to the petitioner, first of all, and then it says the decision of whether to send an invitation is based on multiple discretionary factors, including operational capacity and expected period of time until beneficiary's immigrant visa becomes available. There's a lot to unpack there, because let's look at the visa bulletin for Colombia or I guess any of these countries. For F4, for siblings of U.S. citizens, the final action date in the visa bulletin is currently April 2007.
Yeah.
So does that mean that they're only going to be sending this to people who are, 2007, 2008, 2009?
Well, let's take another step.
Yeah.
They have to be approved because it's the National Visa Center. So immigration.
That's another problem. That's a big problem.
What's the problem, Greg? Is this?
Yeah. So actually, I did a consult the other day with somebody from Brazil, not from one of these countries, and they filed their I-130 for sibling, I think in 2017, and they still don't have an approval on that. So, and I'm guessing that it's probably pretty. I mean, I'm guessing USCIS basically is sitting on all those under the assumption that what good is it to get these cases adjudicated right now anyway? These people are just going to be sitting and waiting. Now there's a reason why those cases need to be approved. So the question is going to be is whether USCIS is going to pull all of these cases from these countries and say we're now going to adjudicate them immediately, or at least on the same kind of time frame as other I-130s where there is a visa number immediately available. And we haven't had any communication yet from USCIS on that part of it.
Well, Greg, let me add to that, because there is information out there. In the most recent published statistics from USCIS, which, by the way, are December 31, 2022, they have 1.9 million pending I-130s. 1.9 million. They only received the whole fiscal year before 222,000. So they have 9 years worth of pending applications. And I would be willing to bet a substantial sum of money that most of those are brothers and sisters. Now, Aaron made a good point. This is obviously, it protects the kids. If there's people have kids, the child status protection and I get it. But they could also be in the U.S. under the parole program if they would approve them, which goes to my big question. Now, immigration today charges $535. Some of these people probably paid $420. But if you take basically 2 million times, let's say average it out, $500, that's $1 billion that USCIS took and never adjudicated the cases. Where are they getting the money to adjudicate 2 million cases? Because they already spent the money that people paid. I'm just saying.
Can I make a suggestion to USCIS if anybody's actually listening on? It's for Aaron's.
I heard Archanu listens to it every week.
They could make a preliminary determination that somebody is eligible for an approval without actually issuing the approval on there. If they're worried about fraud, or if they're worried about people that are applying that are not really eligible in the category, they can make a determination on that without having to actually formally approve the case, and potentially allow those people in a parole status if they wanted to, without screwing up the clock for the Child Status Protection Act. So there's a solution to that if they want. I just think probably somebody didn't think about it, and that's probably why that's an issue.
It's a great point. I just looked up the posted case processing times for the sibling petition at California Service Center, and it's 7 years.
Well, that's not true.
But as much, I do want to say, as much griping as we do about USCIS here, they deserve congratulations on rolling these programs out relatively quickly and dealing with a lot of people and doing it in a way that is also, I think, satisfying some of the Chuck, where'd you go? Satisfying some of the biggest criticisms that people are coming in illegally and they are overstaying and they should be deported, blah blah blah. These are people who are all have to leave and enter legally in these programs or be outside the U.S. all along in order to be able to benefit. So Chuck, I was just saying this sort of addresses this,
I agree. Yeah. Sorry, I had a power outage, a power flash. So,
but it does, I think, quell some of the criticism about sort of amnesty and that kind of thing when you're talking about this population, because they're all entering legally.
You bring up the 7 years though, processing time. That's not physically possible. If, again, looking at their 2022 numbers, right? They took in 222,000 forms.
Mm-hmm.
They completed 150,000. They have 1.9 million.
Mm.
That's not 7 years of work. That's 7 years is a made up out of whole cloth number.
Mm.
Well, that's at one service center, but yeah.
I also wanted to
this whole thing.
I wanted to give a shout out as well to Cyrus Mehta, who always really writes great blog posts about about new policies that are rolling out. And he did a really good post about this program, but he also made the point of it's like what they need to now move on to I-140s and and other categories of people that are facing similar problems. And 526s and I-140s and all sorts of others. So I'm hoping that this is the beginning of a trend, and also rolling it out to all the other countries. It's not just these 4 countries that are facing the problem. It happens to be these 4 countries, I think, are big, have the biggest incentive from the southwest border crossing the country illegally. But if you think this is good policy for a Colombian, it's a good policy for a Brazilian or an Argentine
or Peruvian or anybody else.
French national or wherever. So I would like to see at least this program, if it works successfully, is potentially be extended around the world, not just to these 4 countries.
Doesn't it strike you as odd that Colombia got stuck in with the Northern Triangle? Now you and I both do lots of litigation, lots of stuff. There's a lot of, but if you go back 4 years, there was no Colombians coming. They had a presidential election, they had some issues with police, and because there was this huge flow of Colombians in the late 90s and early 2000s, massive, 2 million people came. And then basically things got better in Colombia and nobody came. And all of a sudden they're coming again. But I'm seeing a lot more Peruvians than I am Colombians. I don't know about you, Aaron.
Way more Peruvians than Colombians. The difference is that Colombia is on the Darien Gap and can give us assistance.
You need the Colombian help, so that's what you do that for.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you haven't been to the Darien Gap, have you, Aaron? I mean,
I have not.
No, not an adventure trek that you've engaged in.
I haven't.
Hey, I do think it's worthy of noting that we have no news on the DV lottery appeals. So, sorry. Well, we have 27 comments today. Wow. USCIS still continue to approve 2022 601. Yeah. Well, again, I'm more than happy if the government's going to keep saying, hey, there's a new case against us, against the government, the plaintiffs, and for us. Send me a list. I'll put another list in of 20 names of 2022 applications. Process was 23 months, 601. Yeah, well, that's not really 23 months. I had somebody contact me yesterday. He's been waiting 3.5 years on the 601. Just absolutely outrageous. What evidence are you seeing of this counting approval from 2019 as a drop in the bucket compared to what they should? Oh, well, again, all we're doing is reporting you what we have on this. Let's see. Why are N600 cases taking so long? One, they're local. So they're not service center cases. Every one of those N600s are at the local office. Two, they're just not a priority. And why? Because the kid is a citizen. They can get a passport. Now, I understand why you need a certificate of citizenship. I'm not excusing them. I'm just telling you, they just don't consider it a priority. Now, we actually had an interview yesterday for one that we filed 2 years ago. Kid's a citizen, but, got a passport. He just needs his cert for college. Some authorities submitted yesterday. That was, again, we mentioned that was just another case that ruled for the government in a motion to dismiss out of Nevada by an Obama judge. But I read the decision, and there's some weird pleadings going on or something there. I don't think it's actually pertinent to us, but there you go. But it's in the Ninth Circuit. 20 there, proving 2020. Yes. Well, okay. Let's see. Are 601s being processed out of order? I don't know. Aaron, do you know if 601s are being processed out of order? It wouldn't surprise me.
I would guess that they are.
Natine, I did update the Iyer case. The Iyer case. Remember, I advised you what the government told me about your November 2019 case. We'll know more about on Friday. Blows my mind. A green card process that took 15 months for an immediate route that takes 5 to 10 years after COVID. It's insane. You know what's even more insane? Even more insane. If your spouse is in the United States.
Chuck froze.
Camera not available.
Oh.
He's probably there.
And I don't think Greg or I have the ability to move the comments, but we can read
hear me?
them.
Can you hear me now?
Now you're back. Yeah.
Power just flashed off again. It's a beautiful, gorgeous day in Georgia.
Right.
My building has a
Call the
generator.
Georgia Power Company.
The Georgia Power. But if your spouse is in the U.S. and you file an immediate relative petition, how long does that take today? 4 months. So they are doing spouse cases, but only if your spouse is in the United States and are legally.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. Passport that was seized at the border 20 years ago was just mailed back to me.
Wow.
What? Wow. Really? I'm just shocked that they would mail it back to you. Aaron, are you shocked? I'm shocked.
Yes.
I've never seen that ever. I've done this 35 years. I've never seen them do that. It's like some dude. You know what may have happened? They were digitizing the file, and they've got this original passport. We can't destroy an original passport.
I bet you that's
That's
it.
probably what happened. So
Interesting.
601. Joe doesn't know what's going on. Come on. There's movement. Just come on. 24 months to become a threshold, reasonable delay in favor of plaintiffs. Yeah, well, my husband is celebrating his second birthday alone. This just sucks. This is the sucky part of the 601. But I think, Aaron, it's a good suit. I think we've got good facts. Let's get over that motion to dismiss. Can anyone do anything about it? That's what the lawsuit is. One thing I would suggest, maybe Greg will agree with me. You should be pounding you should make an appointment at your U.S. Senator's office.
Yeah.
And you represent when they're in town. Say,
Yeah.
I want to meet with you. I want you, I don't want your constituent services. I want you to send a letter as my representative to urge to do and ask for an answer why they're doing this. I want you as my representative to ask for a hearing, and I want urge to do sitting in that seat getting questioned by
I
you.
bet you cases would start to move a lot faster.
Yeah.
if they were hearing
I want
on
them. That's your representatives will meet with you. They will. Well, not all of them, but most of them will meet with you. I need you to do not constituent services. I need you to own this for me, a U.S. citizen who's separated from their spouse.
By the way, somebody asked about the data that I was citing before about these cases that were just approved. These are plaintiffs that I'm talking about. We have we're tracking 298 case numbers, and that's the 5 cases that were approved in the 10. We actually saw yesterday 10 things happen as far as cases being transferred or approved. So that's the most happening in one day in quite some time. So that's
would any of that be happening if they hadn't been sued?
No.
William, Ukrainian immigrants are getting green cards within a year. That's news to me.
Under what basis?
Maybe they're all
if they're applying for asylum, they can apply for asylum after.
Yeah, but they're not getting interviewed on
But
asylum.
asylum, they're not getting approved in a year, I don't think, as far as. Well, even if they get asylum, they have to wait a year after that to get the green card.
Well, the problem for Ukrainians is most of them don't have a good asylum case. Running away from a war is not asylum. That's
running
not
away from a government. Well, if they're from the part of the country that Russia occupies,
Yeah, but they could
it's
say
a
if we're
group that the
resettled.
Ukrainian government can't control. That's
Yeah, but they can go to a different part of the country. They serve firm resettlement in a part of the country. Very few Ukrainians legally, a lot of them applied. Very few legally.
I
Most
think
of
they're
them
actually
are getting
getting a
PPS,
lot of them. I think are getting approved.
but I don't know how they're getting green cards. I don't know how they're getting green
Well, through normal channels,
Mm.
but nothing special for them.
All right. So there you go. That's kind of all the questions. We've got to rip through them a little bit. I hope everybody has a great week. It's the summertime. It's a beautiful day here in the South. Hopefully you don't live in Vermont. If you do live in Vermont, head down to the service center, bail water out so the files don't get all soaked, so we file a lawsuit next year. James Hollis put it on Twitter. It's just the most hilarious thing. Next year it'll be we're delayed because we were closed for one day because of our file room flooded. Who builds a file center next to a river? Who does that?
Yeah. Well, people that are still relying on paper filing, that the last agency in America to get everything filed by paper.
Oh man, it's just so frustrating. Just so frustrating. Aaron, have a great week, and you'll be gone next week, Aaron, or the last week of the month.
Still be here for Tuesday, and then I'll be out.
I will be here next week, and then I'm gone for Rag Ride, the bike ride across Iowa. The following
That's
week.
right. That's awesome. With an excellent view of corn.
I love seeing the corn.
And we'll see you guys next week. Have a great week.
Thanks.